So David, tell me a little bit about Swi-tch. What is Swi-tch all about?
So Swi-tch in context is a logistics technology recruitment business. So we operate with global retailers and logistics companies across the UK, Europe, UAE, and the US. Born out of a bit of adversity, being made redundant at the start of COVID. I was personally up there in terms of sort of the sales of recruitment. We were in the sort of Champions League stages, if you like, and being made redundant in COVID sort of sparked me to think, I don't want to do that again. Don't want to go through making somebody else, a success and then move on. So yeah, so that's where Swi-tch started. But yeah, essentially we're a logistics company, logistics recruitment company that service retail and logistics businesses.
Excellent. No, okay, that's good to know. So tell me, I mean, you talked about COVID and redundancy, but so what's the story of how you got into this seat then? I guess what's a bit of the history that led you to here and what you've done, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, good question. So I was at university in my second, we'll go right the way back. I was at university in my second year, and I decided to take a year out. I'd had enough of the university life and decided to go work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car to do a year in industry. So that's where I sort of cut my teeth in terms of sales, making sure that everybody was protected with excess protection and, the real hard end of the sales spectrum. And then I went back to university for my final year, and I think right before I went to Enterprise, I forgot to tick that I was coming back for my final year, so there wasn't actually a seat for me.
Oh, wow.
So the choices really were, I could do the same course but slightly different, which was business studies, not business management, or go back, go and work for a year and then come back a year later. I tried to do the study, but it was so different to what my previous course was. I decided enough's enough. I actually texted my business partner, Sam, who I barely knew at the time, and said, "You're in recruitment, what's that?" And he, back and forth conversations with him, and he ended up giving me my first job in recruitment. And I worked for a FTSE listed business for 3 or 4 years and cut my teeth, working in the NHS sector. And then I moved on and into a different sector with a different company, which is where Swi-tch has kind of formed its base, which is logistics, technology, recruitment and consultancy. I was there for about 4.5 years and then was made redundant in COVID. A couple of rounds on the golf course with Sam and his current business partner. And I said, look, you guys have set up a really good business in the NHS recruitment space. I want to do the same. And I don't want to work for anybody else. I want to start my own business. And sure enough, they gave me a bit of help, a bit of investment, and that's where Swi-tch was born.
Excellent. No, okay. So always been in recruitment from that point of view, but kind of, by the sounds of it, kind of accidentally fell into it.
Yeah. Well, the 21-year-old me showed, what you can make a lot of money in a very short space of time. Yeah, I'll have that, thanks.
Sure. So that you mentioned there about you didn't want to work for anybody else. You really wanted to kind of work for yourself and have your own business. So what's now that you've done that, and you've done that for quite a period of time. So talk me through some of the kind of what say one of the downsides of having your own business, and what perhaps some of the upsides of having your own business.
I thought you said we've only got 20 minutes. Yeah, I think I listened to a quote a couple of weeks ago, listening to a podcast. I can't recall who it was, but they said, if every business owner was asked the question, knowing what you know now, would you do it again? You'd never do it, because it's so much harder than you could ever imagine. And I think the best part of starting a business is you don't really know what's in front of you, so you're not scared. But the downsides are, sacrifices, having to be away from my daughter, who's now 3 years old. I started when she was very, very young. My wife went through a period of illness, and we had to tackle that whilst still running the business and all of that. But look, we got to where we are, and I'm extremely proud of where we are now. And it's a really exciting business.
No, excellent, excellent. No, and I get that. In terms of, as you say, the downsides are it's you and the business, isn't it? There's nothing else to lean on in a kind of corporate sense. So what's the good side of it then, in that sense?
I think the good side of it is actually being challenged to put your own stamp on things and actually really having to think for yourself. And I know that sounds, it's sort of typical of a business owner, but when you work for somebody else, the only thing you've got to think about is you, your sales, and yourself. You get your weekends, providing you're performing well, etc. But yeah, the upside is actually going through all that hard work and seeing the small changes. God, I was actually right about this part of. You don't have to be that kind of manager to get success. And yeah, so I'd say, yeah, the upsides are when it works and when it goes well. It's not about the financial rewards. It's actually seeing people's life change, and you're part of that.
No, excellent, excellent. And so what's the biggest learning, do you think, that you've had out of this period of time? What's the thing that comes to the front of mind when you think that's one of the real things that I've really discovered as part of, I guess, developing, growing a business?
There's things that I lost a lot of sleep over in the first 6 to 12 months, i.e. cash flow, VAT bills, contracts that were meant to come in that were dead cert that I no longer lose sleep over. And it's because you have to build up that piece of resilience to say things are going to be okay, and if they're not okay in business, you have to just find a way to solve each issue that comes in front of you. You can plan, you can forecast, but sometimes the shutters just come down and you've got to find a different way, divert. So my biggest learning is essentially that, is control the controllables and always try and get a good night's sleep.
I love that. I love that. And as you say, resilience, I guess when it is your own business and that whole learning process, then you do become resilient. But that is also a sign of success, isn't it? Because you probably go through, it's a kind of roller coaster, and you go through the down times and you worry about it, but you bounce back and come out the other side. And I guess the more that you do that, you realize I can do this and this is fine. And that helps build that resilience. So no, that's really cool. Can we talk about people? I mean, clearly you're recruiting people, your recruitment business, but you've got some people within your own team, as it were. What about that aspect in terms of how important are the people that are around you?
Oh, absolutely crucial. We hired quite quickly in the business, and credit to the people that came into the business. But what we tried to do is hire people without experience and train them up, because on paper that's cheaper, but actually that's on me. That was my mistake. We had to pivot the business and bring in experienced people within the industry to really mold the business and make it succeed. That was the hardest thing for me to do, is actually let someone go because they weren't right for the business, but equally the business wasn't right for them as well, and not wasting each other's time. But yeah, the team that we've got now is, it makes me extremely proud when you hear how much they care about Swi-tch, and that's something that I've been in businesses, and that doesn't happen. People will stay in a job for 4 or 5 years and they'll hate it and they'll stay for the paycheck. And I don't feel, I might be wrong, if you go and get some references from the people that work for me, but I believe that everybody that is here is genuinely on the journey.
So yeah, and I don't need to check, because I know you'll know that intuitively by the way that they work with you, the things they say to you, and presumably because they stay with the business, etc., etc. So I think that's interesting. And your point about some people don't work out, and therefore they don't belong in the business, and it's best for them and for you that actually they kind of move on. And I don't, have you found, because I work with a number of people where there's too many times where they look back and say, I kept that person too long and I actually should have dealt with it sooner. Did that ever happen to you in terms of that kind of thing?
Do you know what? It didn't. And at the time it felt like, oh, why are you making me do this? And what I'm referencing there is I had business partners in Sam and Liam, who have already been there and done that. And at the time when they were saying, look, this person, you don't want them to be here, it's not right for them, it's not right for you. And I wasn't used to those feelings because I wasn't a business owner. Right. But seeing hindsight, it's absolutely the right decision to make. So yeah, it was hard at the time, but I'm really happy with where we've got to. Yeah,
that's good. No, excellent. And going back to that piece, because obviously it sounds like you built a really good culture. The people are happy there. You sense that they're loyal, they're passionate about what they do, and you built a good team. So is there one thing that sticks out in your mind that you might have done within the business that's built that good culture that actually makes those people kind of loyal and passionate for the business?
Yeah, I think and I didn't know I was right at the time, but I always thought, what was I lacking when I first started? Or what was I lacking during my time with this company, etc.? And sometimes, most of the time for me, it was autonomy, to be able to think for myself. And each individual that comes into my business, we set the parameters of what is it that you are here for? What do you want to achieve? And how do we get you there? And how can I help you? After that, it's on them. My door's always open and I'm there to support, but I'm not overbearing. And the whether it's operationally, the admin and the operations, if that's not working, we know there's a performance issue. If the sales aren't coming in, we know there's a performance issue. So we don't need to say, how many calls have you made today? Right. How many dials have you made? How many leads have you got? Because everybody knows that they can work exactly how they want to work. And if it fails, we can go back to the drawing board together.
No, that's excellent. I mean, that's just great leadership, isn't it? To be able to end up saying, look, I'm not going to watch you and supervise you all the time. You can be a self-starter. Here's the boundaries within which you operate. I think it sounds like you clearly created those. But after that said, go and do what you need to do. And that's excellent, because that's exactly the way that most people want to work. But you used a phrase there in terms of, I think you said, my door's always open. In other words, and how can I help you to do your job? Which I think, again, brilliant way in which to kind of support people. So no, great leadership. So any other leadership thoughts that you've got, or things that you've learned again in terms of the leadership piece, or things you apply there in terms of
yes, I've had to grow massively over the last 2.5 years, and my biggest sort of strength and weakness is I like to be liked. I'm going to put that on my chest. I like to know that the staff that I work with, or the employees that I work with, like me and I like them, etc. And that can be a strength, because that person will work for longer hours if we need it. But equally, it can go the other way. And my biggest sort of lesson in starting this business is you've got to get that line perfectly clear, so that when you are their friend, you're their friend. But when you need to have those difficult conversations, you're talking to two different people, and that's the bit I've struggled with, and it's my biggest development that's still ongoing now.
Right. No, that's really interesting, and that is a hard thing to do, isn't it? Because actually you're playing different roles at different times, and knowing, I think you said where the line is, or that's really that's
it's really difficult to say to someone, look, this wasn't good enough, you need to step up, and then go for a pint with them half an hour later.
Sure.
But I think it's really important to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's probably down to trust. At the end of the day, I think what you're saying is you built real trust with them, and therefore you can actually play both those roles, and they respect both of those roles because they trust you. Just talking about, because I sense the business has grown, you've been scaling up. Any thoughts on the scaling up and how you kind of get through the kind of next stage of the next stage in terms of growing the business?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the last sort of 18 months has just been very straightforward. We need more customers, we need more sales, we need more relationships. We're now moving to a stage where we're expanding, and it's for us, it's about getting to a point where we hire probably 3 or 4 more people that are directed towards sales. With my personal vision is we don't want to just sit in Birmingham, although it's a brilliant city. That's the reason we set up here. We want to be in the Netherlands. We want an entity in the US. We want to go to the UAE and set up places where we're already doing business.
Yep.
The plan for that is extraordinary. It's a little bit ambitious, but we've got the foundations to be able to make that happen.
Right. No, that's excellent. That's good. And yeah, it's tough when you go internationally. There's other considerations when you do that kind of thing. But and
Yeah.
to come back to that point about taking on the extra salespeople, do you have discussions and issues regarding which comes first? Do you really want to start to see the businesses coming through first before you get the resource? Are you brave enough to get the resource that knowing the confidence that the business will follow? How does that work?
That's the most difficult question that we always ask ourselves is, which way do we go? And I've seen businesses that really put it to the wire and say, look, let's hire the people, and if one of them can be good, we're fine financially. I sit sort of in the middle of that. We've got clients now that have plenty of area for us to do more business in, and that's now a justification to get somebody in to go and explore those areas. Right. But we have dipped our feet in to make sure that if we bring new people in, there's stuff for them to go at. Yep. The other alternative is having the working capital to be able to invest in somebody that already has a network, that already has experience, and they just want a better environment to work in.
I guess that's certainly less risky in the sense that they're bringing kind of business with them in that regard. So yeah,
of course, it's more expensive from on paper in the first instance, but there is less risk in that scenario.
Sure. So one interesting question, really, if you've got an answer, and that is, do you have anybody in terms of books that you read or people that inspire you or podcasts or anything like that you're passionate about, that you listen to, read, or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I listen to a lot of Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, and there's, I don't have any one specific person that I can pick out, but there's some significant people that I've thought, God, I didn't think I'd learned something from them, and I did. There's a great podcast with Jimmy Carr where actually he's not the comedian, he's sort of giving a bit of a mantra for life, and it's actually all about what was the quote that he gave? It was something along the lines of, I'll give you £100 million, and the only caveat to that is you won't wake up tomorrow. And what would your answer be? And Stephen said, well, of course, I'm not going to take the money. I said, well, there you go. Your life is worth £100 million. So every day you wake up, and it's little bits of information that just sort of stick with me.
I love that. That. No, and I was one. That's interesting. I didn't know that. I'm familiar with Stephen Bartlett. I guess most people are. I love his the one line I know from Stephen Bartlett, he's probably said more than anything else, which plays right into your hands, I guess, is the fact that he says, the only thing I had to do was recruit well. If I recruit well, good team beneath me, then basically my job is done, because they do the strategy, the hard work, they do the heavy lifting. And as long as I've got a great team, that works.
And that's the hardest lesson to learn in business, is get better people to do the roles for you, and don't try to do it all. So.
Sure. No, absolutely, absolutely. So any other final thoughts from you, David? Things we haven't, that you might burningly want to tell me that I haven't kind of asked the question about, or anything come to mind?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, you know, obviously I appreciate you bringing me on this podcast. You know, you just before you started recording, you mentioned that you know my mom. So, you know, it's worth a highlight that really she's one of the main inspirations for even thinking about starting a business. You know, I was 5 years old and her and my dad started a business from scratch, and I seen that unfold, and deep down I knew that that's the direction that I wanted to go. Being made redundant was just the final tipping point. So yeah, just a little side note to mother and father to say,
No,
yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, I think that those things are exactly what shape who we are and where we go and what we do. So I mean, I think that's a brilliant example of that you lived it through your parents and saw what they did. And I know your mum was very successful in what she did. So I mean, that's really great. And I think the other point about the redundancy is the fact that, and you know, that hamster's happened to me twice. So, but it's interesting when that does happen. I'm a great believer in that when you get to the low, sometimes it then really just catapult you to actually end up being higher than you might have done if you'd have followed a nice, safe line. I mean, I think that's...
And I think there's two choices in that, is that, you know, with some people, and it very nearly happened to me, you start thinking, why me?
Sure.
You know? And then the other part of you goes, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
And I think those are the two differences, is that if you lean into the side of why me too much, it's going to be a hard time for you. If you lean into what are you going to do about it, I think that's where we've ended up today.
Oh, no, absolutely. Hey, Dave, it's great to talk to you. You look like you're in a prison cell, actually, but I'm sure you aren't really.
Yeah, it does feel like that, yeah, but it is one of these sort of soundproof booths and whatnot. Yeah.
But no, seriously, really good to chat with you. Thanks for all your insights, and all the best with your growth going international. And I think from everything you've described, and certainly with the team that you got, you're going to go from strength to strength. So that's really terrific. So, David, thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Roger.